This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Cornell Studio Supply, located in the gem city of Dayton, Ohio. Find all your pottery and ceramic sculpture equipment and supplies with the best customer service and world-class workshops. Join us for our upcoming Rocket Kiln Workshop with Lisa Orr, July 18th through the 20th, 2025. Visit CornellStudioSupply.com to sign up. Cornell Studio Supply, owned and operated for potters by potters.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of over 4,000 objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com.
Welcome back to episode 546 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today we are going to have a special episode that was recorded live in front of a studio audience at this year's NCECA conference in Salt Lake City. Today, guest host Kathy King is talking with Dustin Yaeger, Joy Ken, and Connor Czora about how recent societal and political changes are impacting LGBTQIA artists. Also wanted to take a minute and congratulate Kathy, today's co-host, along with Matt Katz and Rose Katz, and congratulate them on their 100th episode of For Flux's Sake. It's a hilarious show that looks into ceramic science, and really it's just a good, fun hang. So if you have not listened to the show, check it out. They are a part of the Brickyard Network, so if you'd like to see their back catalog and read blog posts with all the different topics they've covered over the last 100 episodes, you can do that at brickyardnetwork.org. So without further ado, we'll get to the interview.
Thank you so much for everyone for making your way through this Tolkien-inspired route to this room. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Kathy King, and I'm going to be moderating this panel today. I want to first say how sad we are not to have Nikki Green with us today. Unfortunately, the night before we left for NCECA, Nikki let us know that there's a flu going around Alfred, New York, and apparently Nikki has it. And it was really sad. I got to work with Nikki this past year during the Emerging Artists, and I got to know Nikki rather well, and because I'm just a huge fan of her work. So actually we know where she is. She's in Alfred, New York with the flu. And Nikki, we wish you the best and hope you get well soon. If you don't know who I am, I'm based out of Boston. I got my BA in studio art from Connecticut College. I got an MFA from University of Florida, go Gators. And I am currently the director of the Harvard Ceramics Program. And let me note that is a program. We are not a department. Nobody's going to Harvard to major in ceramics yet, but I'm working on it. And I am desperately trying to be an active studio artist and also host for the podcast For Flux's Sake with Matt and Rose Katz from the Ceramic Materials Workshop, which Ben produces as well. So before we begin, admittedly, the topic for this panel is insanely broad. We could be here for a week. So what I wanted to do was to hold this conversation with members of my LGBTQIA plus community, also to represent an intergenerational voice. Now, I'm not going to tell you who's the elder in the group, but we're going to get to it. So we're going to start the conversation. I'm going to introduce the artists, and then we'll have a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience a little bit later. And I should give a special thanks to not that I don't love you so much, Dustin, but I literally was on the plane texting Connor and Joy and saying, like, would you come on the panel, please, please, please? And so thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
And I do understand it is a little strange having images of our work, and now you've had to put your phone on airplane mode, so you can't even Google us. So just use your imagination. So our first panelist, Dustin Yaeger, is a Brooklyn-based ceramic artist whose work deals with popular perceptions of pottery, taste, and class. His work has been exhibited across the U.S., and he has given presentations about his work and research at the Walker Art Center, NCECA, the Soap Factory, the American Craft Council, and elsewhere. They've earned a Master of Arts in Visual and Critical Studies from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and holds a BA from Carleton College. He is the education manager and instructor at Greenwich House Pottery in New York City. And outside of that, Dustin also manages the Grants for Apprenticeships program with Studio Potter Journal. And if you're interested in that, find them in the resource hall. Dustin's work was seen last night at a very lively and very packed CXC Ceramic Collective pop-up at Fisher Brewing. There's another one tonight, so head on over there if you can. It was a lot of fun. And tonight it's another group of artists, right? Okay. Our next panelist is Connor Czora. Connor is an artist, educator, and activist currently based in Washington, D.C., born in Rochester, New York. They received their BFA in Ceramics and Gender Studies from the Maryland Institute of Art, aka MICA. Connor's work explores the relationships between imperial ceramics, cultural taste, and socio-political power structures in the United States. Tracing the history of Western decorative arts, the work interrogates how ideologies are embedded and perpetuated within cultural objects. Connor's art has been shown and awarded internationally, and Connor currently teaches and works at as creative director at the District Clay Center. And if you don't get enough of Connor during this panel, Connor will be featured in a 3 p.m. short form presentation, Fight for Your Copyrights, in a non-subterranean location.
Yeah, we'll be upstairs.
Ascension.
Ascension.
We said it, yeah. So next, let me introduce Joy Kinn. Joy is a Detroit-based artist. They make functional ceramic work based on the process of creating and firing ceramics, and are currently focused on making pots based around the Asian American diaspora and queer identities. Most of their work is fired in soda and wood-fired atmospheres. Joy went to school at College for Creative Studies in Detroit, graduating with a BFA majoring in ceramics and a minor in product design. And Joy is also a production potter at Pewabic Pottery in Detroit. So those of us who are going to next year's NCECA, we can go visit there. And their work can be seen in Here Together, an exhibition of queer AAPI ceramics at the Salt Lake Buddhist Temple, with an accompanying pot stickers pop-up, which is tonight, 5 to 8, at the same location. So, yay. So thank you all for being with us. Yay.
We clap for ourselves, is it?
Clap for ourselves.
You don't have to clap. All right. So anyway, to get the party started here, so could we just hear from each of you, how you stumbled into, the weird and wild world of ceramic art?
Shall I start?
I think you shall, Dustin. Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dustin Yaeger. I started in ceramics at Carleton College, where the universe seemed fortunate to place Kelly Knoll there, just my sophomore, junior year. And I think as a young queer person from Wyoming, it was really meaningful to me to have a queer professor from Montana there. And I was Kelly's studio assistant during breaks the first couple of years that I was there. And I have such fond memories of sitting in our little studio in Bolio and squeezing out little pieces of clay and listening to Eminem and Tom Waits. And it was so meaningful to me to see a successful queer person in the world during that really formative time in my life. So I've been really lucky since then to have a hand in clay ever since, which not everyone gets to after college, working at Low Street in Chicago, and then going to grad school, and then working at Northern Clay Center, and finally making my way into New York and working at Greenwich House.
Wow, fabulous. Connor?
Yeah, hi everybody, my name's Connor Czora. And like Dustin, I got my start with ceramics in college. I originally have a painting background in high school, and my work has always been focused on the intersection of sort of politics and art. I think it's important for me to use my voice as an artist to speak up to issues that are affecting me and my communities. And so in college, I took a wheel throwing elective with Becky Chappell and fell in love with clay. And I took another elective in slip casting and continued falling in love. And eventually, I ended up changing my painting major to a ceramics major, as you're prone to do when you're spending more time in the ceramics studio. So I graduated in 2019 with my BFA in ceramics. And since then, I moved straight to Washington, D.C. I started as a resident artist at District Clay Center, where I worked for 2 years, making more of my political ceramic work. And from there, I became creative director at the studio. So I maintain my own studio practice while also helping organize our visiting artist workshops, gallery shows, pottery sales. It's a great time.
Oh, awesome. Great.
All right. And hi, I'm Joy Kin. I got my start in ceramics in middle school, actually, of all things. 8th grade pottery class. Wow. No, it was just art class.
Lucky.
But we did have like a ceramic section, and Mrs. Elizaday, like basically, we had one class period where you and a friend, there was 2 wheels, and you didn't have to do the project of the day. Didn't have to finish complete work, what you were working on. You and your friend just went to the wheel straight and just worked on it for the entire hour, which how middle school teachers teach a ceramics class an hour is insane.
I know.
But from there, it was like drugs. You know, first one's free, and then you start. So I continued into high school. Took that class 7 times. My teacher Matt Beauchamp, amazing, and he encouraged me to start going to art college. I originally went to college for creative studies for product design. Quickly realized it was not for me because I did not have any illustration background or anything. Knew 3D objects like the back of my hand because I've been making them for however many 5 years. But realized again it was not for me, so I switched to ceramics and have not really looked back. I started working at Wapping Pottery my junior year of college, doing offsite education stuff, doing pop-up raku firings, making pots for them, and eventually in 2021, just after the pandemic or lockdown had ended, our production potter left, our head potter left, and they were just like, "Hey, you used to do this in 2018 for like 2 months. Do you want to do you want to do this? We'll give you a full-time job and benefits."
Wow.
Okay, yeah, why not? Cool. So I'll squish dirt for 40 hours a week. Why not? So in 2021, I became a production potter for them, and I have been doing that since.
Wow, that is incredible. Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, I'm going to start with a question specifically for you, Dustin. On your website, Ceramics in Theory, you mentioned that you offer a line of pottery and fine bullshit. Each piece showcases a really strong personality expressing itself through vibrant colors and raw yet humor-filled messaging. In contrast, your installation work and collage-based vessels appear to focus more on engaging the audience, creating an aesthetic experience that emphasizes use and choice. Can you talk a little bit about the audience's response to the work and how it's changed or evolved over the, I don't want to say like how many years, but the years.
Not that long.
Yeah, okay, not that long.
Still sandbagging on the elbow part.
Yes, thank you for this question. I use a lot of expletives in my work, and I use a lot of text on functional pottery. And I think, I never set out to be a potter. Some people have a very clear vision or experience with clay that they know that that's their path. I was a little bit allergic to it until after college I was working in Chicago at Lil Street and thought, well, I'm making pots, so ergo, I am a potter of some kind. And I think I was playing around with surfaces and sgraffito techniques and writing these messages on there and then kind of trying to back into like, what is this about and what does this do and what am I responding to in the pottery world that's making this work seem relevant, and finding a teeny tiny baby audience there when I was a young person in Chicago. And I think that what I realized I was doing in one way was trying to expand the emotional range that's available at the Pottery Gallery, right? There's a lot of like very comfortable, sensual, beautiful work. That's wasn't the experience that I resonated with right then. Like I wanted crunchy and angry and other things. And I think that the parallel to that was sort of questioning or exploring the functionality and trying to deny the function in some way by using the vessel as a surface to decorate on and to communicate with other people. I'm much more interested in how we communicate about our values and identities by the kinds of work that we have around us, the material culture of life. Much more than the material side of ceramics. So working in porcelain was part of that, right? It's a material where I can have a smooth, consistent line and carve into clay without having chunks of grog come out and things like that. And I think since then, it's been finding an audience online and through boutiques and galleries around. But I'm in a very small niche, I think, of the retail world with that work. And moving to New York helped with that, where I could expand my career. And there was just a bigger audience for all kinds of work there. That was affirming to me. And I think that it has really been about finding that niche that relates to that work and that enables other people to express those values and kind of make their personalities known through collecting that style of work. The decal-based work and the collage-based work, I think, is even smaller niche, because now it has to be people who will recognize some kind of meme image, and the meme image has to be circulating in the world enough to be relevant. And I've noticed that even in the last 10 years of making that work, things move a lot faster. So a meme, I used to feel like it was around for 4 to 6 months, but now it's like 4 to 6 hours. And an image or a current event in the news is just gone out of there. Does that answer the question?
I think that was great. Yeah. I mean, I guess overall, like, do you feel you connect more with an audience through this body of work than when you were doing more installation, that your installations oftentimes asked something of the audience?
Yeah, I did some collaborative or things that invited community participation, and that was a great thing to learn and to practice and to interact with people around. It's really hard to get people to behave the way that I expect them to, and that's part of the beauty of that too, is creating a format and then seeing where people go with it. And I did more of those projects, I think, when I was pursuing exhibitions and being invited to things, and then when production pottery takes over, it really takes over. So I spent a lot more time developing that retail kind of practice online and in stores than I did with the installation work.
Very cool. All right. My next question is for you, Connor. Your work has used such a strong and clear critical voice towards U.S. politics and societal aggression towards marginalized groups. Your depiction of a broken MAGA hat on the ground, to your plate series using collage decals to depict images illustrating the dangers towards queer rights in our country right now. Is evident. So can you talk a little bit about now? I mean, you were making this work before things got extreme. So how is your studio process impacted right now? And you could answer that either like in the professional way or like versus, professional or psychological.
I mean, I think it's all of the above, right?
Yeah.
So I started making this work under Trump's first term. So like 2017 is roughly when I got started with clay. And when I moved to DC, my residency period sort of extended through the pandemic years. Biden was elected. And, for the past couple of years, we've been making work under Biden. For those of you who haven't seen my work, the forms that I'm taking are typically porcelain, think 18th century Rococo style, like really fancy vases that you may see in the White House or one of the Smithsonians or something. And I juxtapose those forms with imagery of popular protests and uprisings, whether that's things for police abolition, whether that's things for trans rights, whether that's things for Palestine. And so sort of using that language and ornament and authority of these imperial ceramics to talk about these issues that the rest of us are experiencing. And as an educator in DC, my students know that work as well. So when it was found out that Trump had won the election, one of my students came up to me and they're like, well, Connor, you have so much to make work about now. And it's like,
Great.
y'all, I had so much to make work about before. I don't want this. This is too much to handle. So I've been keeping a journal, honestly, of what happens every day under the administration. It's really stressful, but it's been my way of sort of grounding myself, especially living in Washington, D.C., where the heart of these issues are coming. So for me, I think a large part of this has actually been the sort of activism portion of my practice, where I'm engaging in protests for queer rights, for trans rights. I'm taking, photography at these protests, and those are then the images that I bring back to my forms. So for instance, we've seen the loads of transphobic executive orders and legislation that have sort of been passed in the past couple of months. And in DC, we've responded quite quickly. For instance, when Children's National Hospital stopped providing gender-affirming care in accordance with Trump's executive order. That's actually illegal under DC's law, and they should not have stopped providing that care. So we organized at the DC Attorney General's office to say, hey, do your job and tell Children's to bring back this care for trans kids, which within a week was brought back for those trans kids. I got some lovely photos of that protest. Yeah, that's worth clapping for, right? Gender-affirming care is healthcare, and it's essential healthcare. And so it's actions like that where I'm actually able to work with the community, whether that is, in Alexandria trying to get sanctuary city resolutions passed just across the river from DC, or again, engaging with these direct actions in the district. For me, that's sort of my way of how can I concretely affect change as a person. And then as a maker, I'm taking those experiences, bringing them back, and celebrating those in the ceramics that I'm creating. Kathy mentioned I have a series called the Pride Service of 18 plates responding to the different transphobic, homophobic legislation that has been perpetuated around the country since 2023. And I'm looking at continuing that series of plates now as we face down so many challenges. So again, for me, it's about honoring the sort of struggle and the work that people are doing on the ground to help protect our communities.
Oh, yay. Awesome, thank you. I was curious, Connor, do you use your own photography in the decals?
So it depends on what or where the event is, right? Mm-hmm. If I am able to attend a protest myself, I always use those personal photographs because I think that's a powerful thing to include first-person perspective. For the series that I showed with you at Platitudes last year, there was some collaged imagery from different media sources covering events. In Utah, for instance, which had passed a gender-affirming care ban back in 2023, I want to say. I can't travel out there to make all of these events. I don't have that kind of money. We're artists. We understand, the flights around the country are not in the cars.
From that body, I thought you were spending a lot of time in Florida.
Yeah, well, thankfully not. Thankfully not. Florida's a no-go at the moment.
Okay. So Joy, your work is process-based, primarily on the wheel. You're not an image maker such as ours, but that's why you're here. And what I love about your work is on Instagram, you often invite us into the studio to see your process and watch you on the wheel, which is wonderful. In the description of this talk, we use the John Dewey quote, "The self is not something ready-made, but something in continuous formation through choice of action." So I wanted to ask, like, how do you think about the idea of self as it pertains to your process in the studio? And does that statement ring true for you?
So as far as like thinking about myself as in terms of like making work, they're kind of one and the same. I am my work, and that's about it. And for those of y'all who don't know, I work at Pewabic Pottery. I'm a production potter. So we're a National Historic Landmark. We're a historic pottery. We've been around since 1903, at our current location since 1907. And so we make production pots. I'm out here throwing 40 pots a day, 40 hours a week. Cups, mugs, bowls, vases, the whole nine. And so a lot of these things are prescriptive. I'm told, okay, you have to make X amount of these because they took this many for the order. We have to refill stock. And so trying to find a personal voice in material that I love and in a space where I don't necessarily have like the most freedom of making what I want has been difficult. But thankfully we have like 2 essentially weight classes of pots that I'm kind of allowed to play and do things myself. It's the only thing that keeps me sane. It's like the dessert at the end of the day. So we have this 3/4 pound pot that we call the petite. And it's free form just as long as you don't make it a cup, because if you make it look like a cup, somebody's going to want to drink out of it. We have cups that are glazed specifically for that, for personal like liability reasons. We do not want people drinking out of our vases because they have metals in them that some people may seem harmful. It's fine. Drinking out of a cup that was glazed with copper glaze is not going to kill you. But within this really tiny 3/4 pound vase like weight class, I've just explored shapes and like they're all like mini self portraits, but it's also all shape exploration and trying to find out what's cool, what's weird. Because like I'm a contemporary potter. I want to be making contemporary pots that are different and weird. And I work in a historical context, and I want to use historical influences from old pots that we've made in the past, but also pots that like speak to me as a person that I just really like looking at, and trying to find like, okay, how can I make this different? How can I make things like weird? So in my boredom of, okay, I have to make 10 pints, 10 rocks glasses, 10 mugs. How can I make something that's not a truncated cylinder? That seems like cool. So right. I will start stacking shapes, and so like I will take like a sphere, and then like I'll throw a triangle on top of it and continue to go on. So like a lot of my process oriented videos on Instagram, you'll see that my entire feed is just the studio. I don't have a whole lot of finished work on there because I'm just a production potter. All I see is gray and tan. So I have to make things interesting for myself and just make really cool shapes that look really good in greenware and bisque and leather hard, and that's it. I don't have any say in what things are glazed as. It just gets handed over to the glaze people across the street. They glaze it however they want, and then they sell it in the gallery. So it's really interesting to try to find my own personal voice just in form alone, because that's all I have. Right. But because in searching through like trying to figure out like, okay, what do these shapes mean to me? Mm-hmm. Like I've kind of come to the conclusion that like they're an expression of queerness, right? They're a pot that exists in the context of a historical place, but also it is an expression of self, but also it is expression of other people around me. Mm-hmm. Like we all take different shapes and forms, and like none of us really look the same, and some of us kind of do. And so using all these different shapes and form languages and like tiny little things and like trying to make interesting, unique shapes that are just like one of ones is freeing, but also it's just like, it's a lot of work. Because like, with our petites, with our 3/4 pound pots, there's 100 that need to get stocked and need to stay in stock at all times. And so if they order 30, we have to make 30. There's only 3 production potters there. So we make at least 1,000 mugs, 1,000 petites, 1,000 of another mug, and then like a year, so like we're just sitting here cranking out pots, and I'm trying to find out something interesting that's not just another mug.
Right.
Another mug. Okay.
Wow. So you really have to like almost time it, like I'm going to be this person.
Yep, 10 pots an hour,
Yeah,
essentially.
okay.
So
Wow.
10 rocks in like 40 minutes, 10 pints in about an hour, and then 10 petites in about another hour.
That is wild.
The larger forms, I try to make like 10 or 14-pound pots that are 2-part assembled stuff, and those usually take, they used to be like an overnight thing. I'd throw 2 halves and then let them sit overnight, torch parts of them, and then put them together the following day. But recently, we have gotten access to a weed burner and a propane tank, and that has made making those a lot faster. I can probably assemble one and make one within an hour, and it's really cool to just see it happen.
Danger.
Yes, I am an active fire risk in our studio.
Well, also you kept talking about weight classes, and for those of you who are listening and on the podcast, there is another group at the convention center, and it's a judo competition, and there are all these signs that say weigh in, and I'm like, rude. Like, who are you talking to?
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
The Brake Clay business is your best source for Brapoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Brapoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, and we also have a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. To place your order, call us at 406-442-2521 or order online anytime at archiebrakeclay.com.
I wanted to also ask, I used to play Pong on Atari, and I remember when phones had cords, but, in all of your roles as artists, your social networks are important. And I guess I was wondering, maybe more recently than not, has that changed at all for you in terms of what you are willing to reveal or not reveal in this current climate? Do you get trolled?
Not really. I mean, are we talking about trans stuff specifically, or like?
Oh no, I'm asking everybody on the panel, but yeah.
I will show my failures when I videotape them. If I mess up a pot real bad, I want people to see it, because a lot of my students are I teach classes at Pawlex as well, and a lot of my students are like, you always do everything perfect. What's going on? I will teach a class demo and maybe not flop a pot the entire time, and people are just like, how do you do this? I get practice, y'all. Mm-hmm. I work at 40 hours a week doing this. I squish dirt all day. So of course I'm going to have the practice and be good, but also I do mess up from time to time. And so if a pot just doesn't work out, if I cut away too much clay from the bottom and it just sits down because it's too wet, then I scrap it, because that's not good enough for me. But also, if a pot is just the wrong shape, the wrong everything, then get rid of it, because I'm not going to be proud of that. I will not want to show that in the gallery. I will not want to have my name associated with it. But people deserve to see it because the process was cool. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've also been more open in the current circumstances. Granted, my work is pretty overt already, so it's not like I'm really hiding anything. But I teach 6 classes a week at District Clay Center. And as a community studio, my students are all adults, and a large majority of them are federal employees. And so over the past several weeks, as we've seen these sort of different department cuts and agency cuts, that community has been more important than ever. I've heard from students in virtually every different department of the government telling me about how, their friends were just laid off. Or I had a student at the CDC who's working on bird flu who said that she received an email that her department was particularly not important and they should be expected to be fired soon. So just these really sort of horrendous things, I think, are sort of having us all come together a bit more at the studio. We're all being a little bit more open with each other. A sort of conversation that we've had lately between students is, how are you? Is not really the greeting to use at the moment, because everybody's, feeling a kind of way. I think we could all, for the most part, agree with that. But we are checking in with each other on a deeper basis. And I think when we do ask that question, it's not the regular just like, oh, I'm great, how are you? Hooray. Yeah. People are willing to sort of share their experiences, things that they may have been struggling with, whether that's in their personal life, whether that's in their studio practice. It's more sharing.
I think I've been a little bit just down on social media sharing in general, not necessarily related to identity issues, but just chasing the algorithm and trying to make content on top of trying to make pots was not fulfilling to me, and not something that I was interested in pursuing. So now when I go through Instagram, I'm like, no, I don't want to be perceived. I don't want to be here. No one needs to know anything about me. Like, stop, enough. I just want to look at pictures of birds, and that's all. But I think that this community thing is something that's important, and it is like the representation online and making that content and putting it out there is still important. And I have thought for a while just about making objects and how it seems kind of strange to say, like, it's hard to censor an object, right? Like, once an object exists in the world, it's there until it is found and destroyed, right? So if you're online making content, it's really easy to shut the viewership off for a number of reasons. But I think by making physical objects that have a limited range of dispersion, but have meaning to the people who do see them, who do find them, I'm interested in that kind of solidity of form too.
Wow. I'll make a comment, and please, if you are thinking about a question, we're going to open it up to the floor in just a moment. But one thing I noticed, many of us, well, all of us are making work within an organization, but 3 of us are within community centers. And I know in our own community center, something has shifted in that I think since the pandemic, the space within the community center, the pottery studio, was everyone was just so psyched to come back, and all of our numbers have skyrocketed, and we've got wait lists up the wazoo, and the space was kind of like naturally not political. Like, people were just there. It's such a amazing place because you walk in, if you know nothing about clay, you've got somebody to talk to about one thing that you have in common, which is learning how to make something out of the stuff. But it started to, the conversations within the classrooms have started to shift a little bit, where I'm getting complaints about, like, well, I don't want to talk about politics here, and I'm like, I don't want to censor anybody. So, what is going on right now? So and that's just starting right now. And I think it's going to be something I'll be watching for a while. Another comment while you're thinking about your question that you're going to come up to this microphone with is, talking about Joy's experience as a production potter is just so amazing. And if I mentioned before about being a juror for the emerging artist, and this is kind of a side comment, but I did want to get this out, that I was shocked at how few potters applied for that. It was like a handful. And I'm trying to figure out why. Like, did they not feel welcome? Is it not being taught? Our educational system is shifting. It's really interesting. So those of you who are potters out there and are considering perhaps applying for something, I really just hope you understand that NCECA is making that space. It's for all forms of art making with clay. And I would just really encourage everybody to participate.
I feel like it's kind of difficult to like apply to that stuff as a potter, because this is also just my 2 cents here, because I've seen this stuff and I've been like, I don't know if I can apply to that. Yeah. Because there's so many people making really wonderful sculpture that's really like deep and political and like smart and like clever and really amazing, and all I'm doing is making work that's a circle, you know? So that's real though. I'm just like, I just make pots. This is mostly functional ware, but these are also explorations of shape, but that's it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So like, that feels like I can't really compete, you know? And
wow,
so
that's wild, because that also brings to mind, if you were at the emerging artist presentation yesterday, one of the questions at the end was from a person who asked, like, I hope you don't think this is rude, but how are you relevant? How is, making work right now in this world, important? And, everybody was very thoughtful about it. And it's just the simple act of making and then turning around and teaching somebody else and sharing what you know with them. And I mean, it really felt that, base. But I mean, from my perspective of jurying, it was so much about not only looking at the work, but the written part of it, about getting to know people and the personalities. And it really was just, getting to know each narrative about each person who was presenting. And for me, it held a lot of weight. Along with there's tons of great work, just as you said, Joy. I mean, that's not the thing, but it's that combination of how, what your intent is and putting it out into the world, which we don't get to see when pieces are necessarily on a pedestal in a gallery, but it's that kind of magical combination that gets exciting. Oh, hello. I didn't see you walk in. Hi.
Hello. My name's Barron from Knoxville, Tennessee. I run a studio there, a community studio. One thing I wish they had said at that when they asked about relevance is existence is resistance. Mm-hmm. Just being there and being a part of what's going on is the important part for me. I have a trans child, and I'm just every day encouraging them to just be there, be there, show up. That's all we need.
Awesome. So, thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's currently open. Oh, okay. It's closed.
I'm short and I was trying to. My bad.
It's okay.
Hi. Is this good?
Yeah, okay. Great.
Totally.
I'm Zoe. I'm unfortunately from Florida, so I have to deal with the terrible politics all the time. I am a ceramics instructor at a community studio, so I do feel more comfortable, but I've been considering becoming a school teacher, but the issue is they're so anti-LGBT that I struggle with the idea of how much of myself to present, if that makes sense. And I've talked to people about some, and granted they're at a college level, which is different, but they feel that that's who they are, who cares what other people think, yada, yada. But then I've also talked to other queer people about how it's none of their business, it shouldn't matter. So I'm in this weird space of not knowing, and, that fear of bigotry and, easily getting fired for something like that. But I would want to create a safe space for children to be their full self, but you can't even have a flag in your classroom. Sometimes I have this fear teaching color theory will be banned because it has the rainbow in it. Yeah. So really, I just don't know, I guess, how to navigate the path of being queer and wanting to teach, especially in somewhere like Florida. And I don't know if anyone has any advice or...
I'll tell you a quick story. I'm sure we all have something to say, but when I was in Florida, at University of Florida, and I started to do the work that I make, which is Sgraffito and it's narrative, and my thesis show was about birth control, and I made a birth control bed, that made it easily accessible, and I got, a good response from that. So I kept making work that made people assume I was straight. And I remember I was demonstrating at NCECA when I got out of grad. So this was like 99, I know, way back. But I was demonstrating and I was talking about making a piece that was about my interviewing women about why they wanted to have kids. And it ended up being this rocking chair and cradle installation, And it was so wild because I just had women coming up to me afterwards like, no, you've got to do it. And, what's your husband think? And it was wild. Like, I felt like I was undercover for quite a while, but I was out to the people who needed to know I was out. But I was scared at that time too. So I do regret that time in a way. Like, I wish the time was a little bit more open so that I could have said, well, I can make work that comments on a woman wanting to have a kid, even though, I'm gay. That has nothing to do with anything. So I don't know. That's just my old person perspective.
I was talking to Robbie Lobel upstairs just before this, and Robbie was excited this recording was happening and was talking about NCECA in New Orleans in 1994, 1995, and talking about the first gathering of queer people, as she said, where Robbie and Mary Berenger and Mark Burns and Matt Nolan and others, maybe some of you were there, going to a little hidden room down a hallway to meet.
I remember.
And I want to always read into the record, right? Like, people have been here at NCECA, and to see so many queer people and allies is not to be taken for granted, I think. And on the podcast, for you listening, there's 200 people here, right? This is a big room. So I think remember that you're part of that tradition as well. There's other panels tomorrow about teaching and the practice of teaching and education that I'm curious to go to. So I don't know if you're interested in those kinds of panels too, but I'm curious about that perspective in the classroom.
Yeah, I really can't comment on the public school education aspect because that's not where I teach. But I know for myself at the community studio, part of why I love it so much is that I'm able to show up fully as myself and not hold anything back, and it's reciprocated from the students, and we're building that community. I think we get into this sort of dichotomy where it's like, do you need to be present and out and super flamboyant at all times to be a beacon for everybody else, and then you just kind of become a token, versus are you able to hold yourself back to be you and just sort of relax a bit. And I think for everybody it's just a matter of finding that balance. What is the part of you that you want to share with your students, with your studio, and what are the parts that you want to keep for yourself, and sort of keeping that in balance. Because something that's important too is that this needs to be a sustainable practice, right? When you're teaching, you don't want to get burnt out within the first year from either oversharing and or from covering it all up.
Or doubting how you're showing up too. That's exhausting.
Public school is always weird because it's it's controlled by the feds. So you're all constantly under scrutiny by not even by the larger the school itself, but also just parents of kids, and kids are just terrible reflections of their parents sometimes, they'll just regurgitate everything that their parents are saying. And so one of my partners, they work in public school and they do not share a whole lot about their identity. They're an English teacher, an ESL teacher, but they work at a Muslim school and they're non-binary, but they don't think that they can share much of who they are as a queer person with their students just because of fear of backlash. And so it's really difficult for them to try to approach this space of being okay, I am myself, but also the kids don't use the correct gender marker, they're Ms. there, which so it's it's difficult. As soon as you go to community spaces, as soon as you go to college, it's a lot more open just because everybody's just free and actually able to be more of themselves. Teaching classes at Pewabic, I'm myself. I was more of myself when I came out as trans, at work than I was at my parents' house, I spent an hour, a year, I want to say, just closeted to my family, but out literally everywhere else except for home. So it was difficult to try to okay, how much of myself do I give to these people, you know? So,
if I can add something real quick too, at the risk of being provocative, right? We always
already
thinking
here.
we're here. Hi, but at the risk of being provocative, like as queer people, we're sort of feeling these sorts of questions constantly, right? How much of ourselves do we share? And I think it is important for our cis and straight allies to show up as well, because you as straight people or as cisgender people are able to show up in a way where you will not receive the sort of backlash that we may if people perceive us as being too flamboyant or too out or, whatever the superlative is. And so we do really need our straight and cis allies to come to the table and help speak up for us too, because that really helps.
And then if I could just add one more, because I do agree that like for parents and faculty, it isn't their business, but at the same time, like I personally repressed my sexuality all throughout high school, yada, yada. And I wonder how different it might have been had I seen more representation. So if I were to be out, that could be beneficial to people growing up to see that like there is other ways of living than what they're conformed
forcing
to.
themselves to be.
Yeah. But then, you could receive that backlash of, oh, they're pushing their agenda. And so it's definitely something that I struggle with internally to figure out what's more
safe.
important.
Like that's the important thing.
Yeah,
Whatever,
I think
what
trust
makes
yourself.
Yes. Because like you're the only one who can have your back in this sort of space. Because like the school is not going to. Unfortunately, it's a public school. They respond to public funding, government funding. So like have your own back.
Thank
Okay.
you, Zoe.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
My name is Jay Stoddard from New York City. Darren, I had no idea you were down at Greenwich
Dustin.
House.
Yes. Yeah.
Dustin.
Hello.
Yes.
Pleasure to see you.
But I know your work,
Oh, thank you.
and you are a very naughty boy.
Oh,
So
right
I just
here.
a round of applause for that.
Well, I'm in good company here.
Absolutely.
Not a boy.
Nope.
I have been doing pottery primarily on weekends for about 20 years. Now, before I get into this, I have to admit that my gaydar is not functional for whatever reason, but I have been looking for gay potters for 20 years. I have found 3. And I've been hopping around to workshops and all this stuff, 3 people.
Wow, you need an optometrist.
I do. I know. I'm looking around this room and going, yes. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, that's great.
But I guess my question is this. So I grew up in the Vietnam era. I have lived in New York during the AIDS crisis, which was horrible.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone just kind of like, oh yeah, I went through this. It was bad. And out of this, both Vietnam, the AIDS crisis, there was so much going on in the city in terms of bringing gay people together around those issues. And so many of those issues have been mainstreamed, I think, to a certain degree, just don't seem to be that relevant. And yet, here we are.
Okay.
Back where we were, I feel like, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, all this is in front of us. I, in my work, in my person, definitely want more gay input and straight input. And I was wondering if any of you have any ideas or if you're currently involved in activities to do that and how we get more people involved.
To create a community.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think social networking, because I've lived the time, has opened up the ability to find artists, depending on how they're, describing themselves as artists. In my day, probably, late 90s, early 2000s, Paul Mathieu's book Sex Pots came out. And that was like the first thing that I saw that had, and I had one lesbian artist in it, I think. And then my work was in it, and I was described as a straight version of another artist by the author. It's like, I would have had lightning bolts coming out of the sky if that happened like today, but at that time I didn't say anything. So it's taken time, but I think today, and these panelists know best, I'm just acknowledging where you're coming from, and saying it's much better now. Mm-hmm. Anybody?
You're in good company at NCECA.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us out here.
But I do think like organizing and like being visible has been like the best thing for me, right? Because like I'm obviously visibly trans, yeah, right. But like being queer and Asian, I've been like able to actually organize and like create community within my like this tiny little niche. There's like 20 of us that are in a group chat, and then we're all just like being supportive of each other and making sure like that we can organize stuff. Like this show here together and pot stickers would not have happened without just creating that sort of community. By the way, selfish shill, like please come by the Buddhist Temple at 5 p.m. We're open. There's food, but also like being able to organize and be able to be present and be visible for other people, to be like, hey, you do the same thing and you're also of the similar identity, like let's be friends. Yes, please come join this group chat. Like just so that way we know that there's more of us, just so that way we can actually show up in numbers and actually have some sort of effect on like a larger scale than just like 4 potters,
Yeah,
so
that's great. And as we're coming up on 2:00, if we could maybe get to some questions behind you, that would be wonderful.
There's one thing I feel like I want to add very quickly.
Okay.
As a potter is one little world for me, and I'm used to working on my own, even though I do wood firing, which is a communal activity. But how do you, and this is to anybody who wants to answer it, how do you get out of that working as an individual clay maker and then integrating that gayness into it, whether that is it through your work or are there other venues? Now,
Yeah. Well, thank you. We want to take it, Dustin?
Yeah, I've been talking to people, maybe queer people, the last 36 hours I've been in Salt Lake, about this panel, and feeling like, gosh, I hope I can think of some positive thing to say in this world. And so talking to Robbie Lobel earlier was helpful, where she said like how cool it is to have 4+ generations of queer potters here now. And I think that how open our community is for younger people to ask elder queers about their work, about their life, about whatever, about thank you for being here, thank you for trailblazing. And I think that goes the other way too, right? For elder queers to be able to say like, I like your haircut, right? like thank you for being here to carry on this ball that's rolling. And I've also thought about the group, Joy, that you talked about, right? And the queer atmosphere group and these other sorts of interest groups that are making space for queer people and for intersectional identities around. And I think we're kind of in the first wave of that. And there could be other smaller groups like that that are organizing in person and online. So it's taken off. Yeah.
I think one thing I would like to add to that, just real quick, like clay, even though like we're individual potters sometimes and kind of stuck in our own studios, is a team sport. Like having like showing work to other people that are your friends and like asking like, hey, is this good? What can I improve on? Like, is my message actually coming across effectively? Like it is a team sport. From like, especially if we work in community studios, has been like one of the better things because I get to ask for feedback immediately and get it. So like finding friends to talk to and just be like, hey, does this look like shit? essentially. Sometimes the answer is yes, and I'm okay with receiving that answer, and I'll change it.
Yeah, I think the community studio for me is the biggest thing because, again, I see myself reflected in my students, and we're able to hold that space together. But, if you're going out and you're firing a wood kiln, you may very well have, other gay potters in that wood kiln. There's a very good chance. I believe there is a panel at some point today or tomorrow about queer wood fire ceramics. So that may be something to check out because folks are out here building that community.
Also, there is a queer atmosphere meeting at the Pot Stickers pop-up. So, yeah, please stop by.
Great. Hello. My name's Natalie. I had a question about art, your artwork specifically. If you've ever experienced creative burnout and maker's burnout, and if you have, which I suspect potentially maybe you have as a fellow maker, what are some of the things that have helped you? I have my own ideas, but I'm curious if there's any enlightenment you might have.
I would say two things. One, given the nature of my work, I unfortunately have constant source material to draw from because we're under attack on a semi-regular basis.
Can I ask about the pressure that you feel and if you have ways to diffuse the pressure?
That's a good question. I think part of that for me may almost be recognizing that making is a sort of cycle, and I'll have periods where I'm in the studio all the time, 24/7, like nose to the grindstone. But I also have periods where I need to step back for a bit and sort of recuperate and connect with community. And I know for me, I'm grateful Washington, D.C., we've got the most gay people per capita in the U.S. It's a wonderful thing. So I'll go out and, hang out with friends at a drag show, and for me, that can be really rejuvenating. I think spending time with friends and in community for me is a way to sort of rejuvenate that artistic creativity and stave off the burnout.
I think it's been really difficult for me as a production potter. Like I sit and squish dirt for 40 hours a week, and so like I'm constantly putting creative energy into making objects that are not mine, or at least not labeled as mine. They're me and like with my maker's mark, they're me with the energy that is within the pot, but also they're not me. It's Plowopic's work. It's not mine. And
Joey, how do you experience physical? Like, do you get tired?
Oh yeah, my body hurts all the time.
Okay.
I have a little bit of scoliosis because my body's just laying slightly to the right for so often. But like it's hard. You have to learn how to work with the material to work with yourself because like my body is not going to keep up at the pace that it was for the longest time. But like learning how to make the material work for you is the smartest thing. Throwing pots more smartly. Yes, I can throw a 10-pound pot, but do I want to? Hell no. I'm going to throw 2 5-pound parts and throw them together because it's easier on my body. Because I can actually get what I want effectively. Like I am going to actually use soft clay to make, again, easier pots instead of using all this stiff stuff and fighting the clay. Because also if I fight the clay, then the pot dies.
And just to say, we're way over time, so thank you so much for that question. If we could just take our last question.
Hi, I'm Tilly. I'm a student at MassArt, and I guess I wanted to set up this question saying that, we live in crazy times as queer and trans people right now, and a lot of people in the United States. But I find so much liberation and joy working with clay, which is such a radically transformative material in the way that we can change it and use it and feel it. And I feel so connected to that as a trans person, and I can do things to clay that I can't do with my body and things like that. And I was wondering if any of you would like to talk about your connection with clay and your own trans body.
Well, I mean,
would just be
queer body also works.
Like trans body, shit. That's we're really singling people out here. But I think I talked about this a little bit earlier. Like a lot of the work that I make, that it feels like me. Like all these really interesting, unique one-off shapes. Like they're self-portraits, but also they're portraits of just people. So like these pots are just people, right? They're expressions of of queerness, of being different, but also like kind of fitting in this weird historic narrative. Like working at Pewabic has allowed me to like essentially shoehorn in the queer identity amongst these like really rich white cis het people who are just like there at Detroit's gift shop buying pots because they think they're pretty, but they have no idea somebody's gay making them, you know. So I'm just like, okay, well, I will this will be in your house. This will be in your house, and you won't know, but I'll know, and that's the fun part for me.
I have sort of two thoughts to that. I've been working with cobalt recently, just on like a project I've been doing with research, and I realized that cobalt carbonate is kind of a transmask material. If you hear me out, it starts out as pink before you fire it. It's a beautiful pink color. You run it through the kiln one time, and it fires to a beautiful blue color. I think there's something real beautiful about that. So that's my first thought. I think my second thought is my senior thesis when I was in undergrad was tying the sort of bodily names that we give to parts of a pot, whether that's a lip or a shoulder, a hip, the foot. And I was looking at applying sort of body modifications to those pots as one might in drag, right? So here's a sort of Sevla-inspired vase that's got a corset and the waist is cinched in like crazy. Or maybe I have overdrawn the lip of a pot to make it look much bigger than it actually is. I think there's fun ways where just with the vocabulary of pottery in particular, you can really play with that sort of connection to the human body. And I find that a really fruitful place to play with.
Professor Kelly Knoll always says, clay can do an awful lot. You just have to know how to ask it. And I think that might be relevant, too, to how we are able to manipulate our bodies in hard and soft ways. And I also want to raise a flag for beauty in this conversation and in the discussion of relevance, too, of sometimes just making something beautiful is a goal in and of itself. And that's in art and humans.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that question. And thank you, everyone, for sticking around. This means so much to us. And I hope you all have a great NCECA. And thank you to my panelists.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dustin, Joy, Connor, and of course Kathy for being a part of this episode, as well as all the folks that were in the audience for this year's NCECA podcast room. Next year's conference is going to be in Detroit, Michigan. It's going to be the 60th NCECA conference, so I'm sure it's going to be a blast. There will be podcast recordings there as well, so if you'd like to get involved, check it out at NCECA.net. Also wanted to thank today's sponsors. That's the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art and Cornell Studio Supply. If you or your organization is interested in becoming a sponsor, you can get in touch at brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in.
If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.